Hey, we're doing stand-up comedy in Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, Austin, Texas, Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. So Canada continues to lose their mind, right? Canada, I always thought Canada was better than the United States. They are on par, if not worse, and seems to be getting worse. So they're messing their pants over the bird flu, and now they're going to start killing ostriches. I'm not kidding, en masse. British Columbia Ostrich Farm has been ordered to kill 400 ostriches after an avian flu outbreak. So here's just a brief behind the scenes. Within the next 2 weeks, the owners of a remote BC, British Columbia Ostrich Farm, are expected to round up 400 of their ostriches and kill them following an avian flu outbreak. The oldest bird is 35 years old. And my mom has names for hundreds of them. She has an extraordinary relationship with the birds. They respect her. She can walk among them. We can't shoot them. That will cause mass panic. We can't gas them because we don't have an enclosed space like a chicken farm. Maybe we slit their throats, but they run at 65 kilometers an hour, said Katie Pasitney, daughter of Karen Esperson, the owner of the Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood. She said a flock of wild ducks arrived on the property in early November of last year, and within a few weeks, some of the younger ostriches became sick. Their symptoms included red eyes and bright green feces. CFIA officials visited the farm on December 31st, New Year's Eve, and they took a swab sample from 2 of the birds that had died. Just 2. On January 9th, the CFIA emailed a letter to the families stating that the ostriches are considered to be poultry and that all birds on the farm would need to be destroyed by February 1st, 2025. If the family could not kill the birds themselves, the CFIA offered to hire a third party to do the work. There's lots of problems with that. We'll talk about them. Ostriches, but they are not like chickens. That's the thing. In that they are red meat animal and are known for their hardiness. In the case of Universal Ostrich Farm, the birds do not leave the property and are not a risk to spread the disease. According to the CFIA's most recent avian flu bulletin, there are 59 poultry farms in British Columbia with active avian flu cases and 180 that have been resolved. So far, almost 8.6 million commercial birds in British Columbia have been destroyed. The virus is not it's not a food safety concern. And there is no evidence to suggest that eating cooked poultry or eggs can transmit the virus to humans. There's been 1 case of the virus transferring to a human in British Columbia, 1. And so now they're fighting this. And so they want to have to kill 400 of their ostriches, and they have a GoFundMe. It's Help Ostrich Farmers Fight to Save Herd from Unnecessary Call. Go to their GoFundMe. And let me bring in the people this is affecting. Katie Pasitney, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is the daughter of one of the owners of Universal Ostriches in Edgewood, British Columbia. She grew up with the ostriches, some of which are 34 years old. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency has ordered the entire herd of 400 ostriches to be culled by February 1st after 2 of the birds tested positive for avian flu. Kari Simpson is assisting the family as their spokesperson, an advocate, and litigation manager. Welcome to the show, ladies. How are you?
Well, thank you for having us, Jimmy. And I just want your viewers to know that I think this is one of Canada's strategies to make sure that we are not wantable by Americans, and this is involving the 51 state. You know, this is a very crazy country, and I'm not even sure Trump could save us at this point. This is just one example of thousands of how insane this nation has become through wokeness, through government overreach, tyranny, draconian governance, and we need a lot of help here. And here's one of the most important and urgent examples that is living today. This is happening now. Those birds are set to be executed on February 1st.
And so Why is this not make sense to you?
Well, I mean, there's a long list here, Jimmy, and Katie can talk about what these birds offer, but I mean, it's the typical nonsense associated with an inept, bureaucratic overreach of people that probably are not qualified to be doing the job they're doing. For instance, and again, Katie can go through these things, but testing only 2 birds with a PCR test. The gold standard is to do an autopsy, do a tissue sample, take the organs, at least look like you're actually trying to confirm utilizing tests that are available that people have confidence in, unlike the PCR test, to really confirm before you go and slaughter 400 birds. They didn't test any of the healthy birds. They don't want to know. They didn't test the feces from the wild ducks that are there. If we really are about mitigating the spread of this, wouldn't you want this wonderful opportunity? This is a living laboratory. We've had scientists now step forward and just, what can we do to help? I mean, we were on a Zoom call with 6 of the top scientists involved in immunology, veterinarian practices, biotech. It's just, and all these people are going, you cannot kill these birds, just from a scientific point of view, because now there's all these birds that are healthy. So either, if it was truly avian flu, we now have a flock that has built natural immunity. Is this something we can do? Oh, wait, that might make big pharma profits decline a little bit. Can't do that. Was it not in, avian flu? And we're very concerned about that because, as Katie can tell you, in 2020, there was a very different pathogen that hit that farm.
So,
yeah.
So, so some of the older, it's your belief that some of the older ostriches are, which by the way, ostriches, very robust, very healthy animals, have built up an immunity to it. That's your theory, right?
Correct. Yeah. At the farm here, so in mid-December, when we started to see some symptoms, they resembled almost identical symptoms to symptoms we had on the farm here in 2020. And in 2020, we had automatically, when we had some symptoms, and then those were relating to deaths, we got a hold of our vet. We did a tissue sample right away. And that tissue sample that went to our vet came back positive, which we have lab results for Pseudomonas. So Pseudomonas is a really, really bad bacteria. And when we asked our vet how could have that got spread, he said, well, it lives in the soil. It could have been as easy though as being transferred from a tourist's hand. And so at that time, my mom started doing her own treatments and stuff on the farm here, and we lost some then, and we had less birds here then. But so when this December 10th happened, we had one that started getting sick, and we were like, man, this resembles the symptoms of 2020. And then by mid-December, we're starting to see more, and they were only our young ones. You're absolutely right. And so we called up our vet through the holidays and left him a message. He was on holidays. But at the same time, so on the 28th, we got a CFIA phoned the farm, and they said they had an anonymous tip that we have really bad avian bird flu here. And so we started explaining our symptoms. And CFIA at that time even said, you know what, like, it doesn't sound like bird flu because you have some birds that are getting sick, but then you have some recovering. You do have some deaths, but in this kind of situation, it would go through the flock really fast, and you would have a lot's dead, just like a commercial poultry farm, like 30,000 dead overnight. So you having all your birds that are getting better just doesn't fit. Do you mind if we come out and do a couple samples, and just to rule out that it's avian bird flu? And so we said, absolutely, no problem. Let's rule it out, because it's never been a problem with us before, and no cases in Canada are that of ostrich in Canada getting avian flu. So on the 29th, we called the CFIA and let them know that we had a couple deceased. And so they sent somebody out on the 30th So that those two ostrich that were going to be their tests, that's which they actually requested, is 2 mortalities to do the tests on. They would have those birds sat there for 16 plus hours waiting for them till the 30th. So they came out on the 30th. They did PCR tests. They did oral swab on each ostrich, and they did a rectal swab. So at the same time, we had about 3 or 4 people here, and we said, hey, you're here and you're all the way out from, we're in the middle of nowhere. Would you mind us doing some samples on our healthy ostriches to make sure, like, if, make sure they don't have it? Could you mind if you do samples on the symptomatic young ones too? Could we get a couple more on the ones that are living? And they absolutely denied it. They said, no, sorry, we can't do that. So they left and had
So
to
that
drive
seems
their
so that
back.
seems suspicious. That seems like
So
that.
suspicious.
It seems like they had a narrative that they wanted to collect evidence that it would fulfill instead of
They
actually
came-
trying to find out what exactly is going on. Right? Their narrative was, this is bird flu, and we're going out to confirm, to have confirmation bias of what we already think, instead of trying to actually figure out what's happening. Because that doesn't make any sense why they wouldn't. They're already out there. They're already there. Why would? So did they give you a reason why they wouldn't take a sample from the other?
Jimmy, but wait, it gets even worse than that. So once they knew that we were having these top scientists becoming involved, they sent a letter to the family saying, if you test any sample, if you treat any bird, we'll throw you in jail for 6 months and fine you for $200,000. Okay.
So this sounds like what you would think would happen in China or in the old Soviet Union or in Nazi Germany. This doesn't sound like something that would happen in Canada. They wouldn't let you treat your own birds?
It's, and when you have an animal, you have an oath to your animal. Are you going to have treatment in your home and withhold your treatment and watch your animals suffer? Or are you going to go treat those animals? You're going to go treat those animals. And testing, you have an oath to your animals. This is, they count on you, they rely on you. And it's our right as landowners, as animal owners, it's our freedom to have that transparency and be able to test our healthy animals and make sure that if they don't have it, that we could save at least 3/4 of them. Or there's being denied this right is absolutely it's just doesn't even make sense. It feels like we're kind of like in a movie, because it's just like, you ask. So they sent us that message, as Kari is saying. We get an email on a Saturday from the government, which was already shocking, and then and highlighted in there saying, if one test or if you treat or test or sample or treat your animals, you are subject to a $200,000 fine or 6 months in jail. And we just said, I know, it's like, so we can't test our healthy animals.
What is the point of that? What is the point of being so punitive about you actually testing or treating or anything to your animal?
We were willing to use a qualified vet, follow their protocols, transport those samples just like CFIA would have out of here. We were willing. We have the people that are ready to to take those samples. And all we want to do, and we could have already done this already. So we've stayed here, and if they're really worried about public safety and stuff, we've already offered 2 weeks ago, let us sample these. We can prove to you that they're no risk, but they won't let us. They haven't went to our neighbors. If they were so worried about us even, and what a high risk we are. We've been here over a month with this. They haven't approached our neighbors and asked them about their symptoms or their animals. Like, have they been symptomatic? We've been targeted here. And I do believe that, my mom, she's such a wonderful farmer, and she's just dedicated to her work and her animals. And she always said, she's like, Katie, these animals are going to do something amazing one day. And for the last 3 years, they've been working with a company that they've created, Struthio Bioscience. And they've been working really close with Dr. Tsukamoto out of Kyoto, Japan. He's just extremely talented and scientist, but his focus is always just been on the ostrich antibodies. the natural immune system of an ostrich. An ostrich has been here, the latest Struthio dating back 21 million years ago. So they are a prehistoric animal that has survived on our earth this long for a reason. And so my mom was reaching out to the government in the past 2 years, explaining their whole antibody program. And really saying like, hey, come on, like, you know, funding, would you be interested in helping fund us? And it kind of just coincidingly just happens, you know, very, very short after her last appeal to the government saying, hey, would you acknowledge our antibody program? And that they came out here just this last time for protocols, and they actually verbally said to us, just so you know, come February 1st, even your personal residence is subject to being gone through, and we will take any byproduct and any, in quotations, thing that we want that has anything to do with ostriches, and we will destroy it. And so, and then at that time, they actually asked us where our COVID-19 antibodies are stored. So
and Jimmy, and let me fill them in, Katie, on this. Okay. It gets even a little bit more disconcerting in that on January 2nd, the family was asked, there's only like one exemption, and that's if you have valuable genetics. So, you know, all the language around the government websites talks about the interest of pursuing science and the values associated with the government agency and all the other nonsense. So this distinct unit category allows you to have an exemption from killing your animals if they have what's called valuable genetics. And the family received a letter on January 2nd, basically saying, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, you've been designated as having valuable genetics. You don't have to kill your flock. You know, this is good. So then what they did is they called the family, being all nice now, and said, look, we need paper. We need all your science. We need your reports on, you know, to make sure that the valuable genetics thing is happening. So this family, being very trusting and thinking that these people were actually, you know, acting ethically and honestly, were kind enough to provide them with their science about the testing around natural immunity, the success rates with regard to the Omicron and the antibodies on that front. And wouldn't you know, 8 days later, after they've shared this information, talking about, you know, having natural immunity testing that shows, you know, maybe there's a better way to go on issues like COVID or avian flu than vaccine. Wouldn't you know that on January 10th, they got another letter saying, you are not designated as having valuable genetics. Your birds will be killed on February 1st.
Yeah. And I think it's really, and it's important when they ask that, they ask us as the farmers. So my mom, Karen, and her business partner, Dave, are supposed to go out there. They're supposed to look each one of those 400 in the eye that I've grown up with. And we're supposed to go and humanely kill them by our own hand. And we're supposed to dispose of them by ourselves. So if I could paint that picture, if we were to destroy 400 healthy, beautiful lives, and by their, how they expect us to dispose of them, by their expectations, it would be 40 pits of animals. So 40 pits of animals
on this is your farm, Katie. This is
on our land. They've just mapped out behind us the graveyard. They just took the quarantine and they drew in a line in our hayland. So we will have to dig 40 pits, each pit 9 meters deep. Each pit will hold about roughly 10 of our ostriches that are fully diseased, they say. And we are supposed to cover them with dirt, go 60 meters apart, put another hole, dump another 10 carcasses, 60 feet apart, another hole, another 10 carcasses. And there's been no environmental studies on, we have ponds and there's natural spring water back there. We have grizzlies, we have cougars, and we're supposed to do that by ourselves, or the threat is by February 1st that if we don't comply, then CFIA will take the matters into their own hands, and they will bring out a third-party contractor killer that will kill our animals.
So there's, again, what we learned through COVID is that the regulatory agencies are corrupted, and this is in America for sure, and that they just make up science like they're doing with you. You have to go 60 feet away and then dig another hole, another 60. And then they don't even want to know. They don't want you to test the ones that you're killing. Even though you're willing to test and see if these birds are sick, they don't want you to do that. So it sounds very nefarious. It sounds they have evil intent and corrupted intent, and this somehow has to benefit a corporation somewhere, right? Is there a theory behind that? Somehow this is gonna, because if they find out that your ostriches actually can build natural immunity to, say, COVID or this new bird flu, that's gonna cut into the profit of big pharma, right?
Well, they just got offered $590 million, Moderna, to create a bird flu vaccination.
Yeah, that was Biden
stamping. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Kari, go ahead.
Biden did that on his last day or two in office. He gave $598 million to Pfizer Moderna for creation of a new form of vaccine for the avian flu.
Yeah.
So that seems to be what, just here, during COVID, you weren't allowed to talk about ivermectin. If you did, they told you were crazy because it was a horse medicine, even though now we find out it was a Nobel Prize winning human medicine that billions and billions of people have taken around the world. Also, they made us think hydroxychloroquine was some kind of fish tank cleaner, as opposed to another one of those medicines that billions of people have taken. And in fact, there's literature at the NIH website that said they knew that it treated SARS coronavirus in vitro. So again, we've learned about the corruption during COVID, and I can't believe that people in Canada are letting something like this happen again so quickly afterwards. What are the people in Canada? Do they even care anymore? Is there any fight in the people in Canada to push back against their government?
We have a beautiful group. We have, it'll make me cry. Sorry. We have an amazing support network, Canadians and worldwide. Americans, everybody sees this, and there's so many layers that don't make sense here. We have a big group that has been put together on saveourostriches.com. People have been going there. BC Rising. We have Kelowna Resistance. There's just it's bringing everybody together. This weekend, we have people are already starting to camp here. They just want to create a little group of support, and they just want to show us that we're not alone sitting out here. People are coming together as Canadians and saying, we can't let this happen to our other farmers. I mean, their policy, if you really want to think about it, they have a stamping out policy here in Canada. So when one bird, you don't even need a positive test. If it is even an assumption that it has avian bird flu, they can kill everything. So they have a stamping out policy. And in my mind, it's really going towards an agenda of stamping out natural immunity. Because if we're stamping out natural immunity, could you imagine the chaos that's going to create going down the line? So you're taking all these genetics of these animals, beef and sheep and ostriches, and these strong genetics that you're breeding for strength and health. And if you keep killing all these animals on all these ranches and farms, and then now there's no natural immunity, but just really weakened immune systems, we're going to have nothing but mutating viruses. We're going to be forced to eat lab meat, which coincidentally was on global news on our TV today about how there's laboratories creating fake milk, and how this is going to be so much better for the planet. So, it is absurd where I don't know where we lost our rights, and I don't know where the ethics are in this, but we need to stand together as farmers all around the world and say, hey, we're in control of our own animals, and we're in control of what goes in our bodies.
So, I mean, I recall very distinctly during COVID in the United States, we were told that that natural immunity was a right-wing conspiracy theory, Natural immunity, this thing that our bodies have done since the beginning of time, that all of a sudden you were told by ubiquitously from the corporate media that is captured and funded by Big Pharma that you were a conspiracy theorist if you thought natural immunity to COVID was a real thing. And now, of course, there's enough scientists and enough doctors found their voice, and they were pushed back on that finally years later, saying, no, that's all crazy. It's crazy that you think there isn't such a thing as natural immunity. Of course, there's such a thing as natural immunity. So we've seen. So what you're saying is that they're doing the same thing now with your birds and with your ostriches. I'm sorry, they're not birds. They're ostriches, and it's Pamela Anderson is from Canada, and I'm just trying to think of people, because I'm sure Justin Trudeau has already called you a racist or a Nazi or something.
Justin Trudeau is on the way out, Jimmy, but we have a bigger problem with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and that it defers to the World Health Organization.
Oh my God! Well, so the World Health Organization is not a health organization. They're a criminal cartel that is funded by Bill Gates almost exclusively. And what's wrong with Bill Gates? Well, he's a megalomaniac psychopath who wants to control the world's food, and he's into vaccines because he, out of his own mouth, says it's the greatest return on any investment he's ever made. He makes 20-to-1 investment on his vaccine investments. He invested $500 million into Pfizer in 2019, right before COVID, coincidentally, and then he cashed it out he invested $50 million and he cashed it out for $500 million. So he had a 10 times investment on his return on his investment. And then as soon as he cashed in his stock, he started shitting on the Pfizer vaccine, saying, well, it didn't stop transmission, it doesn't stop contraction, it's not long lasting, it's got a lot of problems all of a sudden after he cashed out. So this idea that Bill Gates is some guy who cares about humanity, he's not. He's a monopolist, he's a megalomaniac, and he's a psychopath. The fact that he wears glasses and a crew neck sweater doesn't mean he's a good, when the devil comes, he's not going to have horns. He's going to look just like a nerd. He's going to look just like Bill Gates, and he's going to tell you, I've got all the solutions to all your problems. That's why I'm buying up all the farmland in the United States, and I'm trying to get all your farm animals killed so I can create meat in a lab and sell it to you, because he's a big investor in all the fake meat companies. And so, by the way, which is garbage for your health. Fake meat is not good for you. It's like eating margarine. But anyway,
so let me tell you, it gets even worse than that. So, of course, Trudeau was a great adherent of the World Health Organization's 2030 sustainable goals and all the rest of it. And certainly this is all part of it. We have a number of attacks coming in on our healthy food sources here in Canada. For instance, they've now made the province of Manitoba and Saskatchewan the plant protein capital of the world. It's going to supply. And when I tell the farmers in Saskatchewan this has happened, this is the first they've heard about it. But they're also bringing in things like animal tracking now and expanding the mandatory, tags in the ears for bison, farm deer. And of course, these are all attached to UHF receivers and all attached to algorithms. So what happens now if one of your cows, steps on a rock the wrong way and starts limping, the algorithm is triggered and you got to go cull that herd of cattle, right? They're also doing something called identity premises. So every small farmer, and including those people in the city with 4 chickens in their backyards, must now report every single livestock animal, including those 4 chickens, to their provinces. So they're bringing this in, the control, but they don't tell anyone they're doing it. We're bringing this in, but we're not enforcing it yet. It's that trickle in, nudge, get people used to things, the frog in the hot water kind of thing. But this is certainly part of what's transpiring here in the province.
Is there any politician or any person of note that is pushing back against this kind of craziness?
We lack leadership in this nation, Jimmy, and that's one of the things. The days of political right and left, liberal, conservative are over. We're on a very different political agenda, And it seems that the politicians in their bubble are the last ones to understand that that's what's happening here, right? So our rights and freedoms, I mean, when they convince Canadians to inject an experimental concoction into their children who really didn't need it, COVID was no threat. That was one of the indicators that we have some serious problems here. Ironically, the good news is on Friday, the province of Alberta, who commissioned a study to examine the public health orders that were issued in Alberta, that report has actually come out and said the orders did not conform to the science. So this is the first real big leadership from Premier Danielle Smith. But we had problems like one of the things that I was responsible for exposing here. Our judges, our Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, co-chaired a committee with our Attorney General, our Minister of Justice, David Lametti. Now, supposedly in Canada, you know, judicial collusion and independence is something that we really want. We don't want them colluding with the government. And they co-chaired the court's response to COVID. And on that committee were a number of attorney generals and chief justices, but more importantly, also was the Public Health Authority of Canada. No other doctors, nobody who would dare stand up and question things. And they tainted the entire court, the entire judiciary here by this. But regrettably, none of our lawyers have the balls to stand up and say, you can't hear any of these cases, because case after case after case involving COVID has just been tossed or, you know, through judicial notice, just handed over to the government agents that exercise their orders without scientific justification.
Well, right? I bet you know, I'm sorry, I wish I had more time, but I bet if you did test your healthy ostriches and if you did treat the ones that are sick, and that if the government did come after you, I'm sure there would be a GoFundMe or a Give, Send, Go, which is much better, by the way, Give, Send, Go.
No, I've heard that.
Yeah. GoFundMe are corrupt. And
so
they'll take away your money. So Give, Send, Go is much better. But in the future, you'll do that one. But I bet that there'd be a lot of people that would stand up and pay your fine and pay for your legal defense. And so I think you should follow your internal meter and do what you think is right, and don't listen and don't give in to the fear, and do what you think is right. And people, I mean, I know people in Canada, I'm sure that they would stand up for, there's enough good people to stand up for you, and I would help get your message out for sure. So
we thank you, Jane. And and if everybody wants to follow this story, just go to saveourostriches.com, saveourostriches, SOO.com, saveourostriches.com. We're trying to get into court tomorrow or on Friday. It is an uphill battle. We have a team of lawyers, so any help financially is deeply, deeply appreciated. We have science experts now that have stepped forward, and I don't think they've asked for a dime, which I've never been involved in a high-level emergency case like that where people aren't requesting to be paid if you want them to produce their 150-page reports. So it's just been an amazing movement to see this coming. The team of people that's working to make sure the social media is updated, that everybody knows that there's people that are mobilizing to help Katie out on the farm, the people that are there with their video cameras, drones ready to go into action if anybody dares to show up to kill those birds. And as I say, this top-notch group of lawyers that's just working night and day over the last week, because this happens fast. They just give you the order and boom, you've got to have this enormous legal team ready to go, experts. The system is certainly fixed and not in the favor of the people or these big, beautiful birds.
Trump actually, one of the first things he did was he took the United States out of the WHO.
Yeah.
So that's the fact that Donald Trump is doing something way smarter than Canada. I always thought Canada was better than us and smarter than us in many ways, and it turns out they're just as corrupt, if not worse. And they don't have you're right, there isn't a leader. in all of. I mean, if you know, you're going to go to who's the new guy? Poliver? How do you say his name?
Pierre Poilievre will be running
He's the
as the
same.
leader for the federal conservatives. So that election is pending.
Yeah, so I'm sure he's just as bought by those same people. I don't.
And I like that Kari had mentioned something, and it just sounded really good. It was like it stuck in my head. You know, we got to stop hiring politicians, and we got to start hiring leaders. We need leaders who are going to stand up to the tyranny and the overreach and look out for the best interests of the people and say, how are we going to make our country stable? How are we going to be proud?
Just say, how are we going to make Canada great again?
Ah.
Hey, I mean, all the support and worldwide, though, and I keep saying the world is watching. I don't know how many times we've told the CFIA, the world is watching what's going to happen to these 400 ostriches, because these 400 ostriches stand for so much more. They're 400 lives that we're not being heard. We're being stripped of our rights to test, to treat. This is, if there's any time now, the policy change has to happen. It's right now. And it's bringing Canada together. It's bringing the world together. We're getting phone calls from all around the world. And as much awareness as possible, we all need to stand up to this, because this can't happen anywhere.
And so just really quickly, how do you make a profit on an ostrich farm? What do you sell? Their eggs, their feathers? What do you sell?
No, right now it's been sole focus on the last 3 years is antibodies. So my mom has, my dad actually had a stroke a couple of years ago. He's a paraplegic. He stays home, and his disability really kind of carries the main bills. And my mom just believes in those guys so much out there that she cares for my dad. She does her 400 animal chores. She comes in, and she's just focused on these antibodies, because they are just the most amazing thing that could happen with natural immunity, helping animals, helping humans in the future with natural immunity, natural antibodies, and getting us out of this vaccination disaster and nightmare that we've have found ourselves in.
All right. Well, good luck in
thank you.
Good luck in protecting your animals. It's a really dark situation, and our heart goes out to you. Okay. Thank you, ladies.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share the story with your viewers.
My pleasure. Hey, we're doing stand-up comedy in Los Angeles, Dallas, Texas, Austin, Texas, Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.